Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins, and today I'm really excited to be joined by Samantha Jewel. Samantha, you're very welcome to the show. Let's begin before we get into everything that you're doing, because we've got a lot to get through. Let's begin by asking you, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your journey and what you're doing today for our worldwide audience. Over to you, Samantha. You're very welcome.
Thank you. Look, I am. I'm a really eccentric sort of thinker, I suppose. I started off really the last 30 or 40 years as an artist, but I have this unusual background because my family created the first restaurant chain in Australia, and in about '97, when mad cow broke out in England, I was pregnant with my first child, and I went, "What? They're feeding a cow meat?" Like, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. I knew nothing about farming. And we were feeding 50,000 customers a week at the time. And I just thought, wow, I wonder what's going on. I mean, if they're doing that in England, we had this viewpoint, it was all bucolic and everything wonderful. You know, King Charles was like really heading the organic stuff, and there was all this thing. I thought, how could that happen in England? What are we doing here? Because we're so laid back in Australia. She'll be right, mate, no problem. And so I went down this big rabbit hole looking at what was in our family's restaurants, every single ingredient, and I ended up learning all about GMOs and all this other stuff. And I became, I literally went down the rabbit hole, and I haven't really ever come back, because it's a fascinating subject once you get into nature and you see how it correlates to everything, that the soil literally is the ground beneath our feet, is everything. It's everything that we wear, everything to do with our health, mental health. Like, I was looking at these crazy things in America, where babies as young as 6 months old were on Prozac for mood behavior. Mood behavior. A baby doesn't have mood behavior problems. That's got to be to do with the diet in vitro. So I had these sort of epiphanic things that went on, and I just went down this wild journey learning all about this stuff, and took all these ingredients out of the family restaurants. And then I kind of got into organics because it was like the only thing really monitoring from paddock to plate. But look, I did see it was just too expensive for most people. So, and they just weren't ready yet. Like, even in all that time since '97 to now, it's only still something like 2 or 3%, maybe it's 6% now, of the global food supply is organic. And that's, I mean, it's great that it's been growing at 30% per year every year, blah, 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 but it's still not enough. I mean, really, we've got a much bigger problem happening. And we have the opportunity with agriculture and food to actually solve this climate issue. It's not as simple, as difficult as it appears. And we can do it with the carbon market, this existing financial market, to change it. So I'm very passionate about it, as I am about everything. But yeah, that's kind of the beginning of my journey.
Well,
But
thank you for
there's always
sharing
more.
it. Thanks for sharing it, Samantha. And it's a wonderful journey because you kind of mentioned there your family is sort of this Australian family pioneer restaurant business, right? That was sort of, what was it, about 65, something like that. It's sort of
1965, we started. They're still
yeah,
going. We're the longest running restaurant chain in Australia,
it's
and
incredible, yeah.
still running. Yeah.
And I believe you have also a little bit of farming in the family. Your mom has a little
Yes.
bit of an entrepreneurial
Yes,
background.
all of those things. My stepfather, actually, who I lived with all my life, he came from 6 generations of wheat farmers in Goodland, Kansas. So I have been back to the family who is still there. There's only three pioneering families still there farming. And they were the first to discover this thing everyone calls no-till. And I think no-till is great, but it's really just the beginning of the journey. There is so much more to know. And every farm is different, and every farmer has a different set of conditions to deal with. And there is no one recipe. This is the thing I think that's the biggest problem, is that we keep trying to impose a recipe on the planet rather than look at what's in front of us and actually adapt to it, in, work with nature a bit more. That's really the key message, I think, in everything that I do.
Yeah, I love it. And you said something that I really liked earlier. You said you sort of went down the rabbit hole and you've been there ever since. And I'm going to come down that rabbit hole a little bit with you because I want to ask you about the work that you're doing today. You've wrote a number of books, but you have a new book today, which is fascinating. And
Yes.
We were talking off air a little bit about the book, and I want you to really to tell us a little bit about how this came together, why it's important, what the book's about, because carbon is not a dirty word. It's a really important topic, isn't it?
Yeah, look, because it's so big and there's so many aspects to it, and there's the layperson, there's the sophisticated 40-year, 50-year science, soil science expert, there's the carbon traders, there's everybody. I mean, carbon is in everything. And so there's a lot of people think it's all a furphy, but they say, why are you talking about carbon? You need to talk about water, or why don't you talk about biodiversity? We've got this Armageddon occurring of insect loss. I mean, we're in a really bad trajectory, what's occurring. And the reason I stick with carbon and stay in my rails on that one is that you can't grow carbon, you can't hold water, you can't develop biodiversity without all three of them working together. Like, you can grow a certain amount of carbon without animals in cropping situations, but it gets to a plateau. But once you bring the animals in, there's a lot more things that what's that Shakespearean line? There's more in heaven and earth than you would have dreamt of. Horatio, I'm ruining that line, but I'm not very good with that stuff. But it's like it's so much more than you realize that we as yet still don't really know. We're still really learning. But when you let go of that desire to know everything and instead trust your knowingness, and when you start to actually open yourself to the land, which is what the indigenous people, they only had that to start with. They didn't have the science. They had this deep wisdom of looking and learning and feeling. And the thing about the soil is that the carbon, we've got this market already with billions of dollars, trillions of dollars potentially moving through it. And, everyone just thinks about it as trees. And, trees are great. We need trees, absolutely. But they're a lot more, they take a lot longer to grow, and we've still got to grow food. So it's great that you have to have trees in the mix, but it's more about how can we work and garden the planet as a holistically beautiful thing, and incorporate all aspects of nature in a way that actually creates the sponge that is that's what carbon is. Carbon is literally the cathedrals in the soil. It's the thing that creates the environment from which the water can be absorbed like a sponge. Like, you take a sponge and let it dry out, the water just runs off it. But if you create a sponge and let the water get into it, it will hold 4 to 6 times more water. So people talk about water issues. Well, there is a huge problem with the water. We've actually got too much water in the atmosphere. It's actually a blanket of water around the planet that is actually the problem. It's not, so we're getting more and more evaporation out of the ocean. We've got all these systems that are out of kilter. And people think, oh, but the land is tiny, and it is. If you take an entire A4 sheet of paper, you fold it into 3, that's the land against the water. 2/3 of it is water, 1/3 is land. And if you take out of that 1/3 of an A4 sheet of paper and you put a business card on it, there's only 1/3 of a business card that is cropping, that we can grow plants in. The other 2/3 is marginal land that only animals can graze on and eat. Like, that's in terms of food and food production. So we really must, you think, well, how can we possibly influence the planet with just that? But the planet is extraordinary. And the more you learn about it, the more fascinating it is. But what we do on the land affects the rivers, it affects the water cycle, it affects the nutrients that the animals provide, not only for the microbes and all the food and everything, but also the nutrients that flow into the ocean, that affect the sea, that affect the tectonic plates, that affect the movement of the tectonic plates. I mean, it's wild when you really get into the science of it. It's fascinating. And I'm not a scientist, I'm an artist. And I come now as a soil expert, really just because I've spent so long studying it. I've attended conferences all over the world. I even started in 2006. I bought the first soil carbon credit in Australia. They got the government actually recognizing it as a financial tool. And I did that because I went, oh, this is the answer. We need money in this. Because people don't want to pay more money at the supermarket. They don't care about food. They don't care what they put in their mouths. Some do, sure. You'll always hear people say they do. But when it comes to it, they've got $100 to spend on food. They're not going to spend it on organic anything. They're going to spend it on what tastes good, and that'll be salt and sugar. And, like it's very obvious what they're going to do. And so if we're not going to pay for the farmer, and I did that for a long time trying to get the organics promoted and pushed. I see that's just not going to work. This is not going to solve the problem. We're running out of time. So my viewpoint is, well, the carbon market has a solution to create a true regenerative and circular economy. So that's why I have my company Urth. Oh, I guess you can see that. There we are, Urth. That's my company, URTH. And I basically work as an advisory. I aggregate carbon from farmers that are developing carbon in the soil. And we're working with a new model that's only a 1-year carbon credit, which is something a farmer can actually confront. And I work with people in the UAE with ties into some of the biggest nations on the planet that are really trying to solve the problem, even though we've got all these discordant problems with different frameworks and everyone's trying to hold on to their patch, and there's geopolitical things, etc. But there are a lot of good people out there, and people don't realize that people do want to make their money do something good, and they do care about their children, and there is a lot more people wanting to do good than people focus on all the bad. It isn't as bad as everyone says it is.
Wow. Thank you, Samantha.
Sorry, I went out of the top a bit.
Well, we're definitely in the rabbit hole here, and I want to just say that it is
Sorry,
no surprise to me that you are certainly penned as a carbon warrior and a climate solutions activist. That's coming through loud and clear. But I want to ask you about that because you're kind of really passionate, and that people can see that and hear that who are watching us here talking on this episode. But you want to stop talking about the problem and you want to get on with fixing it. I know that's really important to you. And you also have this thing where you talk about it's almost a moral responsibility that we all should have and focus on. Could you maybe unpack that a little bit for me?
Look, I feel that it's asking a lot of people to do that. I think people are stressed. Like the level of anxiety that people have on the planet is a little bit, I mean, the pandemic just took it over the edge. And I try and say, chill out, everyone. Like the first thing you've got to understand, look, this is going really too far out there probably for most people, but the land actually has an energetic field. Actually, scientists even say it reads at 8 hertz, and it actually responds to us. It's a living, breathing organism, and we've got to stop being so anxious about it. Yes, we've been on this trajectory of dominating and raping the planet for a long time, but we just need to start chilling out a little bit, taking a bit of stock, and thinking about what can I do that is authentically me. And I'm say this to you too, Simon. It's not a we've got to do this moral thing. It's like, no, we've got to do it because it's our survival, and we want to be in sync with surviving well. Like, I don't know about you, but I want to be able to eat food that tastes great. I mean, I'm a Tory and I love to eat, and I want it to taste fabulous. So, I mean, I happen to like vegetables, and I know a lot of people don't, but I mean, I also eat meat. I like to make sure the meat is delicious if I'm going to eat it. And I want to make sure the animals had, honestly, people think that animals don't have a good life, but a lot of animals have, they're better looked after by the farmer than their own family. So it's, you have to, because I meet a lot of farmers. I love farmers, and I spend a lot of time talking to them, and they're passionate about their animals. And I think as a consumer, the thing you need to do is to actually revere the farmer about their passion for their animals and the land, and what the more happiness you give them, the better your food will be, and that will feed you back. So it's a circular economy in terms of your intentions, and really it starts with your thoughts. It starts with you thinking about it first. I mean, I wrote the book because I wanted to say it's not that complex. Let's make it simple. And this is a really simple guide, whether you're a politician making political decisions about it or policies, whether you're like the ESG laws are coming in all over the world, and I'm the E in the ESG, I'm in the environment part. And so I had the best carbon emissions offsets to sell to businesses at a very big scale. So we see, my team and we all see, it is very solvable, but it's all about money. And it's about, also I feel it's about giving people hope and knowing you can do something. You can do something in your own, just with your thoughts. And that's actually why I wrote the children's books in 2006. I wanted the kids to know that, they could just know that if they think things to start with, that is the first step. So the ESG thing, the first thing is going to be everybody has got to measure their footprints. And I think it's like $30 billion being spent globally on measuring the footprint. And that's great. That's a start. But then they'll go right down this chain and say, well, who supplies me where and what are they doing? And everybody will start having to look at, well, what is my impact on nature? What am I, in some way, everything is coming from nature. How can we create this a giving back circular economy? So I hope that that's what I bring to people with the book, is a really simple way of looking at it at whatever part of the journey you're at, whether you're a lay person or a highly sophisticated. Up here, these are my endorsees. I have lots of very big experts all over the world that have endorsed the book for its simplicity. And yeah, I had some of them say, oh, you need to do all these academic things and charts and stuff. And I'm like, that's not me. I don't want to do all that stuff. I want it to be easy to read. I want it to be simple. And I had the greatest compliment yet. I had given it to a farmer who said, I haven't read a book in 30 years. And he rang me out of the blue to say, this is changed my viewpoint about the land. I didn't think I had anything else to know about the land. And I was so moved, because that's everything to me, that I could change a farmer's mind to know that there is something else.
Thanks for adding that context and also for explaining that a little bit to me. And I do want to just ask you something else about this book, because carbon is not a dirty word, but the tagline or the byline for the book is about, it's really a guide to carbon markets, governance, and nature-based solutions. And I want to ask you about that because, on one hand, I hear a lot of people talking about it, but even businesses are struggling, I think, at least in some of the anecdotal examples I've got, they're struggling to even measure this. They need to get experts in to help them to figure out what their carbon footprint is.
Yeah,
The governance, the regulations are slightly different depending on what part of the world you're at. And then if I can just maybe go back to real simplistic terms, when people hear about carbon trading being a financial tool and maybe a solution, could you just explain what that actually means? Because
oh,
people
sure.
hear the term carbon trading and they know that it's a solution, but sometimes it's hard to understand. Well, how does that work? What is carbon trading? How does it actually work? Could you just take us through that, if you don't mind, Samantha?
Sure. So I have a partner company that I work with, and they do all the footprint measurement for businesses. So if anybody's needing that it's kind of big scale. It's really only the very large companies with big staff that at this point are being targeted, the big industries. So once the footprinting is worked done, there's been a lot of people working on it. As I say, there's software, there's huge amounts of work has been done on that part. So then you get to the point where you do a strategy around how you can reduce your footprint once you know what it is. And so there's lots of data on how to do that. And that's also what my business partners do. So then once you get through that part, you go, okay, well, I can't actually reduce all of it. There's not even the technology around for it. So now what am I going to do? So that's where I come in. So what we do is we work with farmers, particularly farmers that have actually already worked out how to sequester carbon. So to get carbon into the ground, out of the atmosphere, it's basically plants. It's, in a nutshell, it's plants. That's why everyone thinks about it as trees. But grasses do it faster and quicker. And it's about having lots of grasses, not a monoculture. We do everything in monocultures. And I hear farmers say, oh yeah, but I do rotational grazing. And I grow a crop of lucerne one year, and then I do oats, and then I do barley. But they're all monocultures. They're not growing them in together, because nature has this symbiosis. So what you do is, once you've actually got those symbiotic things working together, they start to feed each other, and they draw stuff out of the atmosphere, like nitrogen. It's one of the big things that actually is put onto the land in this thing they call NPK. But that actually is in the atmosphere all the time. You should never have to put that onto the ground because it's already in the atmosphere, but it's about having the plants that bring it out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil. So once you've got it into the soil, we come out with a rig and actually drill a hole into the ground down to a meter's depth, not this little, 30-centimeter thing. And we take a big core out of the ground and then we send it off to a laboratory and we measure it for how much stable carbon is there. That means how much carbon has been taken out of the atmosphere and held in the ground because of this exchange of minerals. Like the minerals are broken down by the fungi and the microbes, and the plants create sugars in photosynthesis with sunlight, and that exchange is carbon. That it's seen as sugars. Those sugars are fed to the microbes, and that's what provides this whole banquet going on. So if you don't have that full, elaborate orchestra of things occurring, you have a breakdown in systems, and that's really what we're doing. We've broken the systems, so you can reinvigorate those systems, but some of the places have been so degraded, it takes a lot more to get them going. So then once you've got the carbon measured, it's now a measurement, a piece of data. So you say, well, let's to give you an example, we emit 40 gigatons as a human species of carbon per annum. Now, we can sequester per annum 70 gigatons if we all turn to regenerative farming. If the entire planet grew regeneratively, we could absorb 70 gigatons. Now, I didn't work that number out. I got to tell you, I'm not a mathematician, but it's doable. But the big part is this bit, changing the brains, changing everybody's mindset, and obviously the financial structure is a big part of it. So then once you've got the measurement and you've said, all right, well, you've got 2 tons of carbon you've taken out of the atmosphere, then, or 10 or 20,000, whatever tons you are, then you then can trade that on the carbon market. You say that they're saying, well, I've got 10 tons I've emitted that I can't account for or reduce anymore. I've got to keep emitting it. And I say, well, I've got these farmers' carbon and they want, so much money for it. And so you trade it. That's a trade. So there's carbon markets all over the world, and the carbon, because there's no framework that's global, like there's all these different standards, the carbon market is a bit of a mess, and it's still, certainly soil carbon really hasn't taken off that much. And there's lots of arguments because it's got a lot of money attracted to it. You can imagine how many arguments there are. But the reality is, you pay a farmer for doing the right thing by the soil, you will change the planet, because then they've got the money to do the right thing. And the farmers want to do the right thing because as soon as they start improving carbon, and you could say, oh, they should just do it anyway. But as soon as you start improving carbon, then you start to actually get, when it pours with rain, with floods now, it soaks the water up. And when it dries out, well, I know farmers in Western Australia that have been doing this in like 40,000 hectares in a cup of water a year. That's 250 mils. I think they could declare a national drought if you go a week without 250 mils in Ireland. And they can they're growing carbon with bare land, even with parts that have not, like the no-tillers, you've got to have every single scrap of land covered. But if you've got the cycle working, and the plants are doing their thing, they have patches where they dry out and come back and different seeds come up, and some of them are actually designed in nature. They've evolved to wait till everything else dies out before they then germinate. So you can't say you must only do this, like they're doing the no-till thing. Oh, no-till, no-till. It's great you do no-till, but it may not be appropriate everywhere. So it's like, it's not an everywhere thing.
So thanks for explaining that, Samantha, and for shedding some insight into that. And we've talked about Urth, which is URTH.io, if people want to go and check it out. Now,
Uh,
you're the founder of Urth, right? You're the founder of Urth. And we've talked a little bit about the services, because you are ultimately this premium soil advisory. You're looking at the carbon aggregation services. And you've talked us a little bit through the basics of what that actually means in practice. But the line I love about Earth is putting nature on the balance sheet. I think that's really, 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 really good. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that relationship, just coming back to what we started talking about between the farmer and the buyer, because there is
Yes.
to some degree a disconnect there. And I know you're helping bridge that disconnect and bring that world together, aren't you, through the regeneration, through biodiversity, and
Well,
helping that
really, it's
farmer and buyer
education.
relationship. Yeah.
On both sides, it's education. Like, it's both the farmer doesn't understand it, and if they do, then it's convincing them it's actually worth doing because they've got to, they might have to change what they're doing, change practices, which might be expensive for them. So you've got to actually go and I have another business partner, like I've got one that works for the trading and one that works with the farmers who's been doing this since the 70s. And he'll go out on the land and actually give them an assessment and see what they're doing and give them some advice of the things they could do, within the latitude, the soil type, because temperature affects it as well, not just rain, and sort of and what they're growing. So he'll go out on the farm and give them within their financial means and how many people there are. It's often only one person on the farm in Australia. Like, it's not like parts of Africa or India where there's hundreds of people on 1 acre. We've got the opposite, where there's no people and thousands, hundreds of thousands of hectares. Some of the farms are literally hundreds of thousands. A quite normal farm is 40,000 to 100,000 hectares. So that's, I have people say, oh, we've got farms that are huge with 5,000 hectares. I go, that's a pretty normal size farm. 3 to 5,000 hectares is not that big. I mean, hobby farms are considered like 100 hectares. So it's just everything's different in different situations. We're also 2/3 desert, so it's not like where it rains all the time. So you've got really, really different conditions everywhere you are, and you've got to kind of dynamically look at what is going on in that piece of land, and the thing you're trying to do is reward people that are doing something ahead of the pack so that it drives the local neighborhood to want to do that as well. So you reward them for improving above and beyond what everybody else in that region is doing. So that's kind of the idea in the particular methodology that I'm currently working with. And so then there's the education of the farmer and talking them into wanting to do it, because that's a big commitment for them. They're often got millions of dollars of seed and whatever, which I think we spoke about it before about Jeremy Clarkson's farm, about how much they risk up front, and a weather storm can destroy it. So it's very difficult to get a farmer to want to change what they're doing when there's so much at risk for them, like literally so much at risk. So I fully appreciate that. And then on the other side of it, there's the buyer. And you've got all this greenwashing where there was trees being sold that weren't there, and like people say, oh, it's all a furphy and it's all rubbish, it's all corrupt. Well, it isn't. That's just, there are elements like that. And so it's a very nascent market, it's very new, and it needs people like me in the middle of it going to the buyers, yep, look, this is a difficult subject, we appreciate that, these are all the elements, this is what trading a carbon looks like, this is what quality carbon looks like, this is what the differences are, because you could be in a tropical region or desert region and both of them are doing, maybe the desert person's doing better than the tropical one because they're doing above and beyond in their region. So you're trying to encourage that, innovation and willingness to go the extra mile rather than just keep doing the same thing that we've always been doing, which is destroying soil. So does that answer your question, or did I go too off tangent?
No, no, it's perfect, and it really is about that reinvestment, I think, in soil, and also help, people earning money from soil carbon, the biodiversity aspects of it. And it's interesting, you kind of mentioned Jeremy Clarkson there, and I know he's out promoting his book at the same time you're promoting your book. Um, but I think what that program did, it was very popular. Obviously, Jeremy Clarkson, for people watching or listening, very famous from his Top Gear days and his Grand Tour days. And now he's Clarkson's Farm, very, very popular. But I think it
Which I
brought the,
loved.
yeah, and it brought the importance of what we're talking about into the mindset, I think, of a lot of people who aren't really connected to this
Well,
world, you know, to
it's more
farming.
than it's more than that. He brought how difficult all these different things we take for granted are. Like he tried so many different things, sheep and pigs and cows, and like he did all these different animals, and each one comes with a specific set of problems. And he went at it. I mean, sure, he had lots of advisors and helpers and all the rest of it, I'm sure, behind the camera. But the point is that all of that data about all these different things going on is alien to us in the city. I remember starting out and people saying, kids thinking an egg comes from a cow or something because it's in the dairy container or some dumb thing like that. And I thought, my God, we've got this huge disconnect going on here. And what Jeremy's done is fabulous. I mean, he's a bit like, I remember Jamie Oliver doing it with the school lunches, and I'm a long way away in Australia, and I've only even been to England a few times, but I thought, oh, that's such a great way of educating the information. It's made it accessible. He's funny. He's erudite. He's intelligent. I'm blown away with how he's presented that show and made it really accessible and really opened the door for. I mean, I saw bits that I would like to tell him about. Like, I'd like to say, like he does these wonderful meadows everywhere and the flowers, he's doing this, and he doesn't even necessarily know how well he's doing with the carbon in all of that because he didn't really talk about it. I don't think it was even discussed because people tend to poo-poo it. They say, oh, but they should be doing it anyway. Well, he's probably got enough money to do that, but as he spoke about how many people were barely making any money at all. And I think we have to have more compassion for where everybody is at. And I see the carbon market is a means to drive money directly to the farmer that isn't going through a whole lot of circuitous things. And so we really have a very close marketplace where we're trying to get the majority of the money that we trade in the trading space, which again it's been an eye-opener to me how hard it is, how global markets, particularly at this sort of huge institutional level, the laws, the trust. I mean, at the end of the day, people want to handshake people. They want to know people for 20 years. Nobody trusts people, really. I started off in the blockchain space back in like 2017 in the crypto thing, thinking this will change the world because we can do anonymous transactions without having to trust everybody. Now, it's all still down to the handshake. There is very little has changed in that regard. We still want to know people. We still want to trust them. And, that's where I come in the middle. I have been doing this for 27 years on my own, out of my own savings, and I persist despite everything because I'm so passionate about it. And I think that's what gives me the credibility.
Well, thanks, Samantha. Thanks for sharing that. And it's interesting as you're talking about Jeremy Clarkson and Clarkson's Farm. I had the pleasure of meeting Jeremy and James and Hammond, and I actually represented the country on their leaderboard back when they had a leaderboard at one of their live shows. And I think the work that you're doing through Urth, through the new book, and obviously the work that Jeremy's done through Clarkson's Farm, it's certainly, more voices in this area, I think is really, really important. So thank you for the work you're doing. And it brings me nicely on to the next question. I want to ask you about the future because you've got a lot going on. What do the next 6 to 12 months look like for you? What's on your roadmap? What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, it's there's some very exciting things on the map right now, and because my business partner in the Middle East, he works with some of the heads of the biggest countries in the world and that they've got the money to do things, and they're not really even interested in carbon credits. They want to make a difference and put their money into projects that actually regreen things and they're more interested in that focus. So I think I'll be busy doing that, helping with that. And there are countries that are already very advanced in their farming skills and their what they grow and how they do it. And I think I will be just tweaking a little bit of that stuff with experts that I already have, because I realize I've got this global network of extraordinary experts in most countries around the world because I've been so passionate about it. I end up going to all these conferences, meeting them. So I've been like, well, if we're going to your country, do you think you could, help with this bit, and we'll just move it this way so that the nation makes money out of it, because they're all worried about how are we going to do this. And so that's where my savvy business partner comes in, and his company is Ocean Hub, and he is extraordinary with understanding how to help the country come to grips with understanding the strategy around it and how to make it legitimate and move forward. So I feel like I've got this amazing team around me with, and I'm bridging this gap between the two. So I've ended up learning so much about blue carbon, which means everything around the waterways, mangroves and biodiversity and all that, how they measure, how we're going to measure it. And people say, oh, there's no way of measuring it. Well, there is. So it's just, I'm so far ahead of where a lot of stuff is up to at this point. For me, the next 12 months is whoever's got the money, I'm probably going to start there, because I can't keep going like this on a smelly lorry rag, but I will, because I'm like that. But yeah, so probably the next 3 to 6 months is going to be flat out just establishing, what I know within what they know. Like, a lot of it's about finding where people are up to, because some people really know a lot and other people think they know a lot and really don't. So it's been fascinating, because I am getting calls from different parts of the world where I've never been. And I'll say, they'll say, oh, this is happening. And you start to realize that you've got general principles that apply to anywhere on the planet. If you destroy something that was there, nature is opportunistic, something will come back in. And so how do you get it back to being a more equitable thing? Well, first of all, nature's messy. So you kind of got to embrace that messiness a bit, which, as a messy person, I can understand that. I think that when I think about going into somewhere like, I don't know, the UAE or something, I think, how am I going to get them around how neat they are about everything? Because some people are just very, very neat, which is great, but nature's a little bit messier. So we'll see. That'll be the challenge, but I like a challenge.
Very good, Samantha. Thank you. Two quick questions to finish. The first thing is, any sort of parting thoughts or anything you want to leave our worldwide audience with today to think about? And secondly, and really importantly, if people want to connect with you, buy the book, find out about Urth and all the great work that you're doing, where's the best place to point people to?
Okay. First of all, I'm going to say my book is for everybody. So I don't think, if my farmer who said he hasn't read a book in 30 years can tell me it's easy, I can feel with confidence now to say you can read this book too. I feel so that, first of all, it's not hopeless. It's not overwhelming. Just take it one step at a time. We definitely have the tools to handle this. It's just about getting the gears going and everyone getting on the same page, which will take a bit more work. But I personally am a glass half full person, and I firmly believe that we can get into balance. And so if you need help with that, and I will say I'm going to probably only work with pretty big companies at this point, because I think they're the ones making the biggest mess. But you can reach out to me through my company Urth. That's info@urth.io. Or if you just want to read the book, I mean, the book is available from that company, but you can also buy it on my personal website, which is samjewel, SAMJEWEL.com. And you can see, you'll see the book on the front cover there. And please enjoy, hope you enjoy reading it, because it's meant to be an easy read.
Well, thank you, Sam. Thanks, Samantha, for bringing us to the end of this episode. That's a nice position for us to end on. I want to thank everybody who's watching or listening to this discussion. And I'm going to ask them to like, follow, subscribe, do everything I need them to do to help support this show. And I'm going to encourage them to go over to urth.io and to find out all about the book, check out your personal website, and hopefully they'll join me back here for some more discussions with creatives and leaders and thinkers just like Samantha. But thank you, Samantha, for being a guest on the show. It's wonderful to talk to you again today.
Thank you. I'm also on all those other platforms, Instagram and X, and what else is there? LinkedIn, and I'm on everything. You can find me everywhere. I'm really easy to find. And thank you for having me. It was lovely.
Thanks, Samantha.